I stood at the edge of the dock, watching the late morning sun dance across the still waters of Port Marin Marina. The brass rail of the Calypso caught the light like gold, and my reflection shimmered across its hull. Today wasn't just a sunny Saturday. It was a reckoning. Months of planning had led to this moment, and I wasn't interested in applause. Just one quiet glance from my daughter, one flicker of pride or appreciation, would have been enough. Not for my sake, but because I needed to know I hadn't completely lost her. Erica used to light up around me, but things had changed. Ever since she married Brandon Cole, her world had become smaller, more controlled. The laughter was measured now. Her words, cautious. Brandon didn't believe in gratitude. He believed in hierarchy, and I no longer fit anywhere near the top of his. The yacht, the Calypso, was never meant to be a spectacle. It was supposed to be a bridge, a gift, a place for reconnection, for healing. But they didn't know that. As far as anyone knew, it was a high-end rental I'd splurged on for a weekend cruise. Let them believe that, for now. A silver SUV pulled into the parking lot, tires crunching over the gravel with a kind of confidence only arrogance could afford. Brandon stepped out first, sunglasses on, collar popped, expression smug. He didn't look at the yacht. He looked at me like a man sizing up a dog that wandered too close to his car. Erica followed, adjusting her bag, her mouth set in that same worried line I'd seen too often lately, the one that said, "Please, Dad, don't make today complicated." A few seconds later, Michael and Renee Dawson arrived in their modest blue sedan. Renee waved before she'd even opened the door, a container of homemade potato salad tucked under her arm. Michael tipped his hat, eyes already fixed on the polished woodwork of the deck. Brandon was the first to board. His loafers tapped along the teak like he owned it. "This the rental?" he said with a smirk, brushing past me to grip the chrome rail. "Not bad, Elliot. Guess you figured if you were going to pretend, might as well pretend big." His words landed like pebbles, but he meant them as stones. I didn't respond. Erica followed behind, scanning the yacht with a conflicted expression. Half admiration, half concern. "Dad," she said softly, "this must have cost a fortune. You sure this was a good idea?" I just nodded. I wasn't going to defend generosity. Not today. Michael and Renee stepped aboard with the warmth and poise of people who didn't need to impress anyone. "Elliot, this is absolutely stunning," Renee said, her voice full of genuine wonder. "You've outdone yourself." Michael ran his fingers along the helm. "This isn't a casual weekend boat," he said. "This is craftsmanship." I offered a small smile. "She's called the Calypso. I thought you'd appreciate the name." Brandon let out a low whistle as he peeked into the cabin. "Looks like someone raided their pension for a midlife crisis." He laughed to himself, as if it were clever. "You got a yacht captain hiding below deck too, or do we take turns steering?" Erica shot him a glance that went unnoticed. That was the thing about Brandon. He didn't see disapproval unless it came with applause. I led them all toward the upper lounge. "Let me show you around before lunch," I said calmly. "There's more to her than meets the eye." Brandon tapped the navigation panel as we walked. "Sure hope the rental agency gave you the weekend discount, Elliot. Otherwise, this little fantasy's gonna hurt." The breeze shifted slightly as we reached the rear seating area. I turned toward the harbor, letting the sun hit my face while they explored. Michael admired the compass. Renee gasped when she saw the dining setup inside. Erica said nothing. She just looked out at the water, her face unreadable. Brandon, meanwhile, hovered by the galley sink, flicking the faucet handle with idle curiosity. "Doesn't seem like your style," he said casually. "All this flash. You always struck me as more of a fixer-upper guy. Tools in the shed, work gloves in the truck. Plumber, maybe." He chuckled. "Guess even plumbers get lucky sometimes." I stared out at the waves. I didn't flinch. I didn't reply. I just listened to the water lapping against the hull and reminded myself that tides always change. Brandon lingered near the helm, his fingers tracing the polished chrome controls like he was sizing up a toy he intended to break. He didn't ask how the yacht worked. He made assumptions. That's how men like him moved through the world. They never needed to understand anything to claim it. "You know," he said, tapping the throttle with mock seriousness, "this thing probably has more buttons than your old Ford. Hope the rental agency gave you a crash course. Wouldn't want the captain of the SS midlife crisis running us into a sandbar." Erica offered a forced laugh and sat beside Renee, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Her eyes drifted between the water and her husband, and I wondered if she regretted the way the morning had already turned. Michael stood beside me, watching Brandon with that quiet stillness only experienced men carry. The kind that says, "I've seen men like this before, and I know exactly who they are." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Brandon poked his head into the lower galley. Fully stocked bar, marble countertops. What is this? A floating penthouse? He turned back toward me. Seriously, Elliot, you sure you didn't sell a kidney to make this weekend happen? His grin widened. Or maybe Clara left you more than we thought. That name, Clara, the way he said it, like it was just another item in a ledger. He had no idea what it took for me to finally touch the money she left behind. No idea how sacred it felt to spend it on something that wasn't just luxury, but legacy. But I said nothing. I'd learned long ago that silence has teeth. Renee glanced at me with concern, but I shook my head gently. I didn't need saving. I needed patience. Every insult Brandon fired was another brick in the wall he was building, one he wouldn't be able to climb down from later. It's beautiful, Michael said at last, cutting through the tension. Not the kind of boat someone stumbles onto. This took planning. His words were measured, but I caught the edge in his tone. He was offering Brandon a chance to step back, to reconsider his approach. Brandon, of course, didn't take it. Planning? Brandon scoffed. Come on, Mike, it's a rental. You call the number, put in your card, pick the weekend, and boom, fake lifestyle activated. He clapped his hands together. They even throw in fancy soaps for the bathrooms. Erica shifted in her seat, clearly wishing she were somewhere else, maybe anywhere else. I wondered when she'd started trading her father's dignity for her husband's convenience. You know, Brandon continued, stepping toward the galley sink again, you might want to check this faucet. It's got that loose feel. Wouldn't want it popping off while you're rinsing shrimp cocktail. He grinned. Need me to take a look? I mean, you used to be pretty handy, right? Before the yacht days. His voice was louder now, reaching the upper deck where the breeze had begun to stiffen. The smell of salt carried across the seating area, sharp, fresh, like a warning before the storm. I've got it covered, I replied calmly, walking toward the edge of the deck. I'm sure the fittings are sound. Sure, Brandon said, raising his hands in surrender. Didn't mean to offend. I just figured, old habits die hard. Once a fixer, always a fixer. You were always patching pipes or repairing fences. Guess it's in your blood. I paused at the rail, fingers curling around the warm brass. Plumber. That's what he saw when he looked at me. Not a man who built 2 companies from nothing. Not a man who survived losing the love of his life and still managed to give more than he took. Just a working-class relic who got lucky one weekend with a rental yacht and too much time on his hands. Elliot, Renee said softly, standing beside me now. You don't have to take that. He's being cruel. I gave her a small smile. Let him talk. Brandon leaned against the doorframe, looking pleased with himself. Hey, I'm just saying, the way you were fiddling with that sink earlier looked like a pro. Made me think maybe you moonlight for the marina now. Captain Elliot the Pipe Whisperer. Might want to bring your wrench next time. Erica winced. Brandon, stop. What? He said, laughing. It's a compliment. Takes skill to fix stuff like that. My guy charges $150 an hour just to show up. Your dad's got the talent. May as well use it, right? The silence that followed was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a line being crossed. I'll get lunch ready, I said quietly, walking past him toward the galley. Feel free to look around. Just don't touch anything delicate. Brandon didn't follow me immediately. He lingered on the upper deck, arms folded, scanning the Calypso like a man who couldn't decide whether to be impressed or offended. I moved quietly down into the main salon and began setting out the wine glasses and plates I'd laid out hours earlier, hands steady, movements precise. Every detail had been arranged for a peaceful family afternoon. Bone china, polished cutlery, chilled white wine, folded linen napkins in soft gray. Clara would have loved this. She always appreciated elegance that didn't scream for attention. Footsteps clicked overhead, then descended the stairs with uneven rhythm. Brandon first, then Erica, Michael, and Renee. Brandon walked in like he was inspecting an open house. He touched everything. ran his hand along the mahogany cabinetry, peeked inside storage drawers, opened the wine cooler. "You've really leaned into the fantasy, huh?" he muttered. "This layout's nicer than half the apartments in the city." He opened the fridge, poked at the gourmet cheeses. Imported, of course. Erica followed more cautiously. She paused at the dining table, her fingers brushing lightly over the edge. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Honestly, I didn't expect." Her voice trailed off as she looked around again. "I just didn't expect this." "Neither did I replied without looking up. "But here we are." Michael and Renee moved slowly, respectfully. Michael examined the woodwork and lighting fixtures with a craftsman's appreciation. "This is a weekend rental grade," he said quietly. "Whoever fitted this out took their time." Renee stepped closer to the piano tucked beneath the starboard shelves. "Is this real ebony?" she asked. I nodded. Clara always wanted one on the water. She used to say music should drift like sails. Brandon rolled his eyes and flopped into one of the leather lounge chairs. "Well, I hope this little retreat didn't wipe out your retirement. Looks like something an investment banker would panic buy after a divorce." I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned toward the entertainment console, pressed a button, and soft music filled the cabin. Classical, but not pretentious. Just enough to drown out the sound of disrespect. "Would you like to see the cabins?" I asked. "Might as well know where everything is in case you decide to spend the night." Erica's eyes lit up faintly. "We're staying overnight?" "That's the plan," I said. "Weather's perfect, the marina's quiet, figured we could enjoy dinner, sleep here, and head back in the morning." Brandon pushed himself up with a grunt. "Fine. Let's see the rest of the rental palace." I led them down the narrow hall past the galley, into the guest cabin first. Twin bunks lined either wall, both convertible into a queen. A full-length mirror hung opposite a cedar-lined closet. Brandon stepped inside and snapped his fingers. "I'll give the rental agency this. They know how to bait a client." "A little tight for my taste, though. Hope the master's bigger." "Come on," I said, gesturing toward the end of the hallway. The master suite opened like a scene from a movie. Queen bed with memory foam, mounted flat screen, rainfall shower behind a frosted glass divider, brushed brass fixtures that caught the sunlight perfectly. Erica gasped, "Dad, this is incredible." Brandon walked in, made a slow circle, then opened the bathroom door and turned on the tap like he was testing water pressure. "Decent flow," he muttered, "though I bet that sink upstairs gonna be trouble. Feels like it's already coming loose." He shot me a quick glance. "You might want to mention that to the rental company." I looked him in the eye. "I'll make a note." Michael stepped forward, hand on the doorframe. "Elliot, you've really done something here. I don't know what your plans are, but if you ever decide to make this a regular thing, I'd be happy to crew for you." "You're always welcome," I said, meaning every word. Brandon scoffed under his breath. "Careful, Dad. Sounds like your friend's trying to take your job as captain. That means you'd be demoted to deckhand, or plumber." He chuckled at his own joke, but no one else did. Erica looked away. I stepped back into the hallway. "Let's head back up. Lunch is almost ready." As we moved through the cabin, Brandon lingered behind. I noticed his glance pause on the brass compass mounted just above the steps. He ran his hand across it with exaggerated interest, as if trying to understand what made it shine. Then he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "This is still all pretend." He couldn't help himself. Even surrounded by elegance, he needed to believe it didn't belong to me, that I didn't earn it. That somehow, by fixing a faucet or laying out lunch myself, I was playing out of my league. What he didn't realize, what none of them realized yet, was that the man he was mocking wasn't playing at anything. He was simply waiting for the right moment to let the truth do all the talking. As they returned to the upper deck, I stayed behind in the master cabin for a moment, letting the sound of their footsteps fade into the teak and silence. The brass compass above the stairwell caught the sunlight and reflected a narrow beam across the far wall. I followed it with my eyes, remembering the first time I saw that compass, not here on the yacht, but in a quiet, polished showroom 2 months earlier. March 4th. It was raining. The salesman's name was Devin Laird. Young, smooth, but not arrogant, the kind of man who knew when to talk and when to stay silent. He didn't try to sell me a dream. He simply walked beside me while I explored the yacht that would soon become the Calypso. He knew what I was there for, even before I explained. "We get men like you from time to time," he'd said, "not trying to impress anyone, just reclaiming something." I remember the way he said that, like he understood. The tour was quiet, professional, every surface was gleaming, the wood was real, the brass untarnished. "The cabinetry's mahogany," Devon said, "custom milled. You won't find a single factory edge in this entire cabin." I ran my fingers along one of the doors, felt the grain rise gently beneath the finish. "And the sound system?" I asked. "Discreet, hidden wiring, high fidelity." He smiled. "Your guests won't know it's there until the music starts." At the time, I thought about Clara. How she used to hum when she cooked. How she would have filled this boat with song before we even left the dock. I'd already decided by then, but I waited a few more days to come back. When I did, I wore the navy suit Clara bought me 10 years ago for my last board meeting. The suit I'd kept in pristine condition, even though I had no one left to wear it for. That day, I wore it for myself. Devon greeted me with a folder under his arm and 2 espressos. "Shall we go over the paperwork?" he asked. "No need," I replied. I reached into my coat pocket and slid over a cashier's check for $2.7 million. He blinked once but didn't flinch. "You'll need to sign a few documents for the Coast Guard registration," he said quietly, "and we'll schedule the interior upgrades per your notes." "You mentioned family photos in the main cabin?" I nodded. "And a hidden camera system," I added. "Discreet. I don't want anyone feeling watched. But I need coverage." "That can be arranged," Devon said. "A gift?" he asked gently, and I nodded again. "For my daughter and her husband." It had all started on Erica's birthday 2 months ago. We were sitting in my kitchen, the kind of quiet, awkward evening that used to be filled with joy before Brandon came into the picture. She looked tired. He was scrolling through his phone, complaining about mortgage rates. "Sometimes," she'd said, staring into her wine glass, "I wish we could just disappear onto a boat, like we used to, when Mom was still here." That was all she said, just a whisper from the past. But I heard it like a siren call. I spent the next week looking at marinas, then brokers, then yachts. I wanted something that could hold all of us, comfortably. Not a toy, not a party boat, a home on water. I imagined Erica smiling again. I imagined Brandon, for once, speechless. I imagined dinners under the stars, maybe even future grandkids curled up in bunks down the hall. I wasn't trying to buy her love back. I was trying to anchor it before it drifted too far. When Devon handed me the keys, he said something I'll never forget. "This isn't just a purchase. It's a message." I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. The yacht was delivered a week later, just as planned. I had the photos installed, the linens replaced, the pantry stocked with their favorite foods. I even asked the marina to stage it like a weekend rental. Made up the documentation myself. Printed contracts, a binder of rental rules, even a fabricated invoice tucked neatly into the galley drawer. Everything had to look temporary, disposable, unimpressive. Until it wasn't. The day before they arrived, I walked the entire deck alone at sunset. I touched every railing, every fixture, every detail I had overseen with care. I poured a glass of Clara's favorite wine and set it on the table where she would have sat. I didn't drink it. I just wanted to feel her near. The plan was simple. Present it as a rental. Let them enjoy it. Get comfortable. Bond. Let Erica see me not as a burden, but as a father who still had something left to give. And when the moment felt right, reveal the truth. Show them that the Calypso was never meant for me. It was meant for them. But what I didn't anticipate, what no amount of planning could prepare me for, was how quickly some people destroy what they believe doesn't belong to others. How eager Brandon would be to tear it all down before he knew what he was standing on. How little it would take for him to show his true colors. As I returned to the upper deck that afternoon, the sun now higher in the sky, I saw Brandon tapping on his phone with one hand while the other absent-mindedly flicked the edge of the helm. Erica sat beside him, half listening. Michael and Renee were admiring the marina skyline. The wind shifted slightly, and I caught a faint whiff of diesel from a nearby boat pulling out of its slip. None of them knew what I had done. None of them knew the price I'd paid. But soon they would. And the moment that was supposed to be about joy and legacy would turn into something else entirely. The table was set by noon. Bone-white china on navy blue placemats. Silverware aligned perfectly. A bottle of chilled Chardonnay stood tall beside the floral centerpiece. White lilies and eucalyptus, the kind Clara used to cut from our garden in spring. I had grilled the salmon that morning, laid out roasted vegetables, and folded the napkins into careful triangles. It wasn't extravagant. It was intentional. Every piece of that meal had meaning. Every step was an effort to restore something I didn't realize had been slipping away until it was almost gone. Brandon arrived first, of course. He walked into the salon with that exaggerated swagger, clapping his hands like a host greeting guests at a party he didn't plan. "Now this," he said, surveying the table, "this is impressive. Did the rental agency throw in a catering service, or did you pull this off with those old plumber hands of yours?" I glanced up from the wine bottle I was uncorking. "I managed." He pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "Well, I'll say this, Elliot, you've got taste. I mean, it's borrowed taste, but it's working." Erica entered next, her heels clicking softly across the polished floor. She paused, her eyes sweeping over the table. "Dad," she said slowly, "this is really beautiful." Her voice softened on that last word, like she hadn't expected to feel what she was feeling. I gave her a small nod and gestured for her to sit. Renee and Michael followed, both clearly impressed. Renee smiled as she sat across from Erica. "Elliot, this is absolutely lovely. It's like something out of a magazine." Michael remained standing for a moment, looking around the room before resting his hand gently on my shoulder. "You've gone to a lot of trouble," he said, "and it shows." Brandon popped the cork on the wine before I could offer and poured himself a glass. "Well, here's to living large. Let's enjoy it before the rental clock runs out." He raised the glass toward the others. "To Elliot's weekend fantasy." No one clinked, no one echoed the toast. He drank anyway. As I served the salmon, Brandon commented on the wine. "Good bottle. You raid Clara's old stash for this one?" he asked with a smirk. "Or did the marina throw in complimentary pairings with your luxury package?" I said nothing. I placed a plate in front of Erica, then moved to Renee. "Dad always was a good cook," Erica said softly, trying to recover the mood. "He used to make trout on the weekends when I was little." "Yeah, well," Brandon cut in, "retirement gives you plenty of time to perfect your recipes. No deadlines, no meetings, just salmon and spreadsheets." Michael frowned. His knife paused mid-cut. "That's enough," he said quietly, but Brandon kept going. "Hey, I'm just saying, this is what retirement's all about, right? Spending your golden years blowing savings on weekend yachts and gourmet meals you can't really afford. You should write a book. The Frugal Millionaire, How to Fake Wealth and Impress Your Friends." He laughed alone. The laughter bounced off the polished surfaces like something sharp. Erica kept her eyes on her plate. Renee sipped her wine with shaking hands. Michael set down his fork slowly. I continued serving, my hands steady even as my heart pounded in my chest. Not from rage, from restraint. Brandon picked up his fork and pointed it toward the centerpiece. "Nice flowers. Bet they came with the yacht too. Maybe if we dig around, we'll find a hidden karaoke machine and a smoking jacket in the closet." I looked at him, finally. "Is there something you're trying to say, Brandon?" He blinked, caught off guard by my tone. "I'm just having fun," he said quickly, trying to lighten the mood. "You're not lightening anything," Michael said, his voice carrying a weight it rarely needed. "You're making a fool of yourself." Brandon shrugged and stabbed at his vegetables. "Relax, Dad, it's just lunch." But it wasn't. It was never just lunch. It was always a test, a chance for him to assert control, to remind everyone, especially me, that he was the voice in the room now. Not the old man who'd paid for his wedding or his house or his emergencies. Just the guest who dared to act like the host. "I think," I said, setting down the serving spoon, "that maybe we should enjoy the meal without the commentary." Erica looked up sharply, eyes wide. She hadn't heard me speak with that much edge in years. "Agreed," Michael said. "Let's eat in peace." For a few minutes, we did. The food was excellent. The music played gently in the background, but Brandon couldn't leave silence alone. "This salmon's really good," he said, chewing. "Honestly, maybe you missed your calling. I hear the yacht club's always hiring staff. You could be the onboard chef/maintenance man." Renee gasped softly. Erica dropped her fork. I turned toward him slowly. "You're a guest here, Brandon. I said, my voice cold now. You'll behave like one. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. Guest? Come on, Elliot. You rented a boat for the weekend. Let's not pretend you're the Commodore. I walked to the head of the table and sat, folding my hands in front of me. That's the second time you've mocked me today. Third, if you count the plumber comment, I suggest you stop. Brandon laughed too loud. You're seriously upset over a joke? He looked at the others for backup. None came. This is ridiculous, he muttered. You're being sensitive. No, I said evenly. I'm being clear. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet you only get before something breaks. Renee took a long sip of wine. Erica stared at her plate. Michael looked at Brandon like he was seeing his son-in-law for the very first time. Brandon, sensing the tide shift, pushed back his chair and stood. I need air, he said, stepping toward the galley. Don't worry, I'll be careful not to break your fancy rental faucet. He disappeared down the hallway, his footsteps echoing on the deck like closing doors. I stared after him, heart still, eyes fixed. Not angry, not yet, just done. This meal was meant to be a bridge, a reunion, a quiet peace offering. But now it was something else entirely. Brandon's footsteps disappeared below deck, fading into the hum of the yacht's systems. I didn't follow, not yet. I remained seated at the head of the table, listening to the shift in the air, the subtle tension left behind in the wake of his exit. Erica sat still, eyes lowered. Renee gently dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin, as if pretending the silence wasn't heavy. Michael, to his credit, didn't say a word. He simply watched the hallway where Brandon had vanished, jaw set tight. From below, faint sounds began to rise. Cupboard doors opening and closing, the clink of glass, the familiar creak of the galley sink's pull-out drawer. Brandon wasn't looking for air. He was exploring, probing. I could feel it in my chest, the slow tightening coil of intuition. I stood, quietly clearing plates, as I moved toward the countertop. Let's have coffee on the upper deck, I said, smiling softly as if nothing was wrong. It's a beautiful day, Michael nodded, standing with deliberate care. You go ahead, Elliot, I'll help you with the dishes. Not necessary, I replied. Please enjoy the view, I'll just be a minute. As they ascended the stairs, I remained behind, not to wash dishes, but to listen. There it was again, that faint metallic sound, not the soft click of the faucet being used gently, but something more deliberate. Grinding, tugging. I moved slowly, quietly, positioning myself near the galley entrance without revealing I was there. The water turned on, not a gentle stream, a full surge. Then another harsh metallic scrape, followed by a muttered curse under Brandon's breath. Damn thing's tighter than I thought, he whispered. I stepped back into the shadows and waited. Another tug. Then silence. Then water again. This time it didn't shut off. The sound of rushing filled the galley, and a moment later, I heard him hiss through his teeth. You idiot, he mumbled to himself. Too much. Too fast. There was no panic in his voice, only irritation. Not fear of damage, but annoyance that his performance hadn't gone exactly as rehearsed. When he finally came back up, Brandon looked relaxed. Too relaxed. His hair was neatly combed again, shirt tucked just so, and he wore the smile of a man who believed the next move was his. Sorry about that, he said smoothly, returning to his seat. Just wanted to freshen up. Sink's acting a bit strange. Might want to have the rental company take a look at it. I didn't answer. I poured coffee and handed cups around. Brandon didn't offer to help. Of course not. He leaned back in his chair and stretched, satisfied. Seriously though, Elliot, great meal. Not what I expected, but you pulled it off. Michael studied him. Everything okay down there? Oh, yeah, Brandon said with a casual wave. Just a stiff faucet, probably worn out. These rentals get heavy use. Erica shifted slightly, concern clouding her expression. Was something broken? Not broken, Brandon said quickly. Just loose. Nothing major. But I'd already seen the scratches on the chrome earlier when I prepared the wine. They hadn't been there that morning. Now they were fresh. Thin grooves like someone had twisted the base with a tool meant for steel, not brass. Later, after everyone had returned to the deck to sip coffee beneath the awning, I moved silently toward the navigation console. Just below the main helm, I opened the hidden panel and tapped the screen. 8 cameras lit up the display. High-definition feeds from every corner of the Calypso. Hallways, galley, engine room, and yes, the guest head where the faucet sat. I rewound the timeline. 1:46 p.m. There he was, Brandon, entering the galley with that same arrogance in his stride. At first, he opened drawers, tapped a few cabinet doors, looked around, then he found the toolkit tucked beneath the sink, a small marine-grade set I kept for emergencies. He tested the faucet once, found it working, then checked the hallway behind him. Satisfied that no one was watching, he grabbed the wrench and applied it to the base. He braced his foot against the cabinet for leverage and twisted. The feed shuddered slightly from the vibration. Twist, grind, snap. He smiled when the faucet gave way, water gushing upward in a chaotic stream. The look on his face wasn't surprise, it was satisfaction. He wasn't reacting to an accident, he was celebrating success. He grabbed a towel, wiped away any visible metal shavings, and neatly returned the wrench to the drawer. Then he tested the handle again. Water continued to run. Perfect. Just broken enough to be someone else's problem. I copied the footage to a backup drive, labeled it with the time code, and slid it into my jacket pocket. As I exited the console room, I passed the galley once more. The water still dripped, weak but persistent. The kind of leak that couldn't be blamed on wear and tear. Not with those gouges in the chrome. I picked up the wrench, examined it, and held it in my hand. It wasn't just a tool. It was the key to a man's intentions. Brandon had seen something beautiful and decided to damage it, not because it offended him, but because he couldn't control it. He thought the yacht was rented. He thought I was weak. He thought, like so many times before, that if he acted first, he'd get ahead of the consequences. But this time, he didn't know the cameras were watching. And he didn't know that I wasn't just some old man fixing a leak on a borrowed boat. I was the owner. The architect. The one who had built the game and was finally ready to play. When I returned to the deck, he raised his cup at me in mock cheer. "Problem solved?" he asked, grinning. "Nothing I couldn't handle," I said calmly. Marine fixtures take a beating, but they're built to last. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the marina and the light softened into gold, I waited until everyone was on the upper deck before I slipped away again. The galley was quiet, the hum of the water pumps steady, but beneath that silence was something heavier. Something I was ready to bring into the light. I returned to the navigation room, closed the door behind me, and powered on the surveillance hub. The screens glowed to life one by one, illuminating the small space with soft blue light. I sat down, inserted the backup drive, and pulled up the footage again. I watched it in silence. Brandon's smug expression, the way he tested the faucet like a predator circling prey, the moment his hands gripped the wrench with the certainty of a man who knew he wouldn't be caught. But he was wrong. He hadn't just broken a faucet. He'd confirmed everything I'd tried not to believe about him. And worse, he'd done it with intent, not impulse. Calm, controlled, calculated sabotage. I trimmed the segment, tightened the timestamps, and selected the clearest angle. Camera 3, mounted just above the pantry, gave the best view of his hands. I backed up the file again, this time onto a second drive. I tucked inside the leather-bound binder marked Emergency Procedures. Then I shut down the monitors, exhaled slowly, and stood. I didn't feel rage. Not anymore. What I felt was colder, deeper. A clarity that only betrayal can bring. Brandon had no idea the yacht wasn't rented. He thought he was humiliating an old man who had stretched too far for one weekend of opulence. He thought damaging the faucet was a quiet way to assert dominance, to chip away at dignity without leaving bruises. But what he'd actually done was give me the final piece of proof I needed, not just for tonight, but for everything that would come after. I returned to the deck with coffee in hand and sat beside Michael and Renee, who were admiring the horizon as sailboats drifted past in silence. Erica sat off to the side, legs curled beneath her, arms crossed over her chest. She wasn't sulking, she was uneasy. Brandon was in his element again, cracking jokes with just enough politeness to pass for charm. The damage he'd done below deck was forgotten by him, but not by me. "I think it's time for a story," I said quietly, interrupting the breeze. Brandon chuckled. "What's this, bedtime already?" "No," I said calmly. "Just something I'd like everyone to see." I reached into the binder beside my chair, pulled out the tablet, and powered it on. The screen lit up, and I adjusted the brightness so it could be seen clearly, despite the fading daylight. "I installed a security system on the Calypso last month," I began, watching their reactions. Hidden cameras. Standard precaution. The marinas had a few thefts recently. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want the atmosphere to feel suspicious. Brandon shifted slightly. Okay, he said, dragging out the word. Are we doing some kind of yacht documentary now? I ignored him. But today, I continued, something happened below deck, and I think it's only fair that we all take a look together. Renee leaned forward. Erica straightened in her seat. Michael's brow furrowed, already sensing that this wasn't about maintenance. I tapped the play icon. On screen, Brandon appeared at the bottom of the stairs, stepping confidently into the galley. He opened drawers, examined the sink, and glanced behind him. Then the audio kicked in. Clear, crisp, the wrench being pulled out. The first test of the faucet. Water flowing smoothly. The second test. Still normal. Then the tightening of his jaw, the positioning of his foot for leverage, the wrench grinding into the base, the snap. Erica gasped. Renee covered her mouth. Michael leaned forward, eyes hard. Pause it, Brandon said suddenly, his voice sharp. Pause the damn thing. I let it play. He reached for the towel, wiped the faucet base, smoothed the chrome, a smirk on his face. Turn it off, he barked louder now. This is out of context. I looked at him without blinking. What part is out of context, Brandon? The wrench? The force? The towel? Or the smile after it broke? Erica stood slowly, her face pale. Brandon, she whispered, but her voice trailed off. Brandon's hands were clenched. You installed hidden cameras to spy on us? To protect the yacht, I said evenly. And today it served its purpose. He laughed, bitter, defensive. Come on, it's a stupid faucet. I was trying to fix it. Maybe I overdid it, but this? He waved toward the screen. This is ridiculous. Michael's voice cut through the evening like a knife. You lied to us, Brandon. You sabotaged something that didn't belong to you and then tried to play the victim. Brandon turned to Erica, desperate now. You're really going to take his side over a faucet? Erica shook her head, her voice trembling. It's not the faucet, Brandon. It's that you did it with a smile. Renee finally spoke, her voice soft but sure. You broke it on purpose, and you didn't even flinch afterward. That's not a mistake. That's malice. Brandon took a step back, as if the weight of their judgment physically pushed him. Fine, he said. I made a bad call, but this is overblown. Is it? I asked, because I think it's just the first crack in a much bigger foundation, and now everyone's seen what lies beneath it. He looked around for an ally. Found none. Even Erica wouldn't meet his eyes. You set me up, he accused. You baited me. No, I said calmly. You exposed yourself. I simply pressed play. The deck fell silent except for the gentle clink of Renee setting down her coffee. Brandon stood alone now, not because we pushed him there, but because he chose to walk every step toward it himself. I'll fix the damn thing, he muttered, his voice brittle. I'll pay for the damage. That's not the problem, Michael said, rising to his feet. The damage was never to the faucet. Brandon stood frozen on the upper deck, arms crossed, mouth tight, while the damning footage from the tablet still flickered beside me. That smug smirk on his face as he broke the faucet, calculated, deliberate, and proud, was now reflected back to him under the setting sun, and for once he had no words. I didn't speak either. I let the silence stretch like taut rope, the kind that creaks before it snaps. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had heard it. There was no more pretending. I'll pay for the repair? Brandon finally muttered, his voice brittle. It's not a big deal. I looked at him, calmly but directly. You still think the issue is the faucet? Erica stood stiff beside the railing, arms wrapped around herself, like she was trying to keep from shattering. Michael remained seated, his posture controlled, eyes fixed on Brandon with that quiet stare that slices deeper than shouting ever could. Renee sat with her fingers pressed tight around her coffee cup, shoulders tense, her silence saying everything. This wasn't a mistake, I said. It was a moment of clarity. You showed us who you are when you thought no one was watching. You broke something that didn't belong to you because you believed it didn't matter, because you assumed I didn't matter. Brandon gave a short, sarcastic laugh. Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. It's a sink. I was frustrated. Maybe I overdid it, but this whole theater, you're making it sound like I committed a crime. Michael stood and walked forward, his voice low and even. You didn't just break something. You humiliated the man who invited you aboard with respect. You mocked his hands, His age, his generosity. You treated all of this like a joke. Brandon's face turned to Erica. You're seriously going to stand there and let them crucify me over a faucet? You know me. 10 years, Erica. You know me. Erica stepped forward slowly, her eyes glossy but focused. I thought I did, but what I saw on that screen, that wasn't frustration. That was control. You wiped the chrome like a man hiding a weapon after the fact. You looked pleased. Brandon stared at her like he didn't recognize her voice anymore. You think I meant to destroy something? I think you meant to destroy him, she replied quietly. I took a breath. What you didn't know, Brandon, was that this yacht isn't rented. Brandon blinked, confused. What? Michael's head turned slightly. Renee's eyes lifted. Erica stiffened. I looked at all of them, my voice steady. The Calypso is mine. I bought it in March, paid in full. Every inch of this yacht was built as a gift for Erica and her husband. I was going to reveal it after lunch. I wanted today to be a surprise, to give you both something permanent, something beautiful. Something that carried Clara's memory forward. Erica gasped. You bought this? Yes. This was going to be yours. The yacht, the marina membership, the legacy. I saved your mother's insurance for years. This was my way of giving it back to you both. Brandon stumbled back like I just hit him. You were giving us the yacht? That's right, I said. Until you broke the faucet and showed me the kind of man I'd be handing it over to. He looked stunned, lost. You didn't say anything. You set me up. No, I said. You revealed yourself. I gave you comfort, food, family, and you responded by mocking me and destroying something you thought I couldn't afford. You treated this boat like a prop in some charade, but the only performance here was yours. Brandon turned to Erica again. You believe this? Her voice cracked as she whispered, I do, and I wish I didn't. He reached out to her. She stepped back. I continued. I watched you lie, manipulate, and try to spin the story even when the truth was staring back at you in high definition. You're not sorry. You're exposed. Brandon swallowed hard. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. No, Michael said firmly. A mistake is spilling coffee. A mistake is losing your temper. What you did, that was a choice, and now you're standing in the ruins of it. Brandon's voice turned cold. So what now? You keep the boat? You cut us off? You punish me? I stared at him calm. No, Brandon. I reclaim what's mine. This wasn't about punishment. This was about seeing you clearly, and now I do. He looked around, searching for someone, anyone to side with him, but the faces that once smiled at him were now stone. Erica looked at the deck. Michael crossed his arms. Renee turned her face to the sea. You were going to give us this boat, he whispered again. I was, I said, but I don't give gifts to men who destroy before they understand the value. And just like that, the man who came aboard full of arrogance and cruelty now stood exposed in silence, with nothing left to say. The wind had shifted slightly, curling through the ropes above as I guided the group back into the main lounge. The warmth of the sun gave way to something cooler, something quieter. No one spoke, not a word. Even Brandon, usually quick to fill a silence with sarcasm, followed behind like a man walking through fog. I could see his mind spinning, trying to backpedal, trying to regain footing on ground that no longer existed beneath him. I gestured toward the sofa and the chairs surrounding the helm's viewing bay. They all took their seats, Erica beside Renee, Michael standing with arms crossed behind them. Brandon hovered for a second, then sat stiffly at the edge of the lounge's bench, his eyes darting. He still didn't believe it. Not fully. Not yet. I took the small black case from the storage locker beneath the helm and placed it on the table. The leather was worn, the edges faintly scratched from time and use, but the brass clasp still held firm. When I opened it, the air shifted again. Inside were the documents. Ownership, registration, transferal options, a printed blueprint of the Calypso, folded into fourths with my notations in the margins. I slid it forward. You can read it if you'd like, I said to Erica. It's all there. The down payment, the upgrades, the insurance, everything tied to my name. This yacht was never rented. I never needed to. Brandon stared at the papers like they were written in another language. Why would you do all this? He asked, voice cracking. Why not just retire somewhere? I looked at him, not unkindly. Because I'm not fading away. I'm not handing out pensions and waiting to die. I've watched too many people do that, shrinking, apologizing for existing past their prime. This yacht wasn't about ego, it was about legacy, about giving Erica something permanent, about Clara, about rebuilding what was broken when we lost her. Erica's hands trembled as she touched the corner of the blueprint. "You built all this for us?" she whispered. "For me." "Yes," I said softly. "But more importantly, I built it to remind you that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it's the man who fixes the tap, who holds the rope steady when the sail catches wind." Brandon shook his head. "You should have told us." "Would it have changed anything?" I asked. "You still would have mocked me. You still would have seen an old man with calloused hands and assumed he didn't belong in this world of teak and chrome. That's why I didn't say a word, because I wanted to see who you were without the filter of status. You didn't pass that test, Brandon." Michael stepped forward now, picking up the blueprint. "This design, it's got modifications not listed in standard builds." I smiled faintly. "Custom work, reinforced deck rails, dual-engine stabilizers, added a secondary navigation interface. All done over the last 8 months. I spent weekends with the engineers, midnights reading marine schematics. It became a passion." Michael gave a low whistle. "You didn't just buy it, you crafted it." "Every detail," I said, "even down to the teak trim." Renee finally spoke, her voice low and clear. "That's why you were so calm when the faucet broke. You knew he did it, but you weren't surprised." I nodded. "Because I've seen this kind of man before. The kind who steps into someone else's domain and breaks it to feel bigger. He didn't just damage a fixture. He tried to undermine everything I represent." Brandon stood now, pacing a few feet, his tone shifting from disbelief to anger. "So what? This whole thing was a setup? You wanted to humiliate me? Get your little gotcha moment with the family gathered around?" I didn't move. "No. You did that yourself. You wrote your own ending. I just provided the stage." His eyes darted between us. "So what happens now? You throw me overboard?" Michael's voice came in sharp. "No one needs to throw you anywhere, Brandon. You're sinking all by yourself." Brandon turned to Erica, desperate now. "This can't be real. You can't be okay with this. He embarrassed me. Us. In front of everyone." Erica's reply was slow, steady. "He didn't embarrass you. You revealed yourself. You mocked him. You lied. You sabotaged something meant for us. And when you got caught, your first instinct was to make excuses instead of apologize. That's not love. That's not partnership. That's fear. You're afraid of not being in control." Brandon's hands dropped to his sides. "So what, you're taking his side now?" "I'm taking the truth side," she said. I looked at her then. "I don't want this yacht to be a symbol of pain. I still believe in what it represents, but it can't go to someone who sees it as just another status badge to flash at business dinners." Renee glanced up. "Then what will you do with it?" I smiled. "I'll keep it, for now. I'll sail. I'll teach my grandchildren if they ever want to learn. I'll let it be what it was always meant to be, something earned, not inherited." Brandon's voice was now thin, barely more than a whisper. "You really were going to give it to us?" I nodded. "Until you made it clear you weren't ready for it. A man who destroys before he understands value doesn't deserve the weight of legacy." He slumped into the bench again, defeated. The sun outside had begun to dip, casting long shadows through the viewing windows. No one moved. The silence was no longer tense. It was final. I stood slowly, gathered the documents, and returned them to the leather case. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's revelation. And now that the truth is out, there's nothing more to explain." Michael extended a hand, firm and quiet. "Well done, Elliot." Renee nodded silently, her expression soft. Erica gave me a look I hadn't seen in years, one of respect, of recognition. She didn't say a word, but she didn't have to. We understood each other now. Brandon sat alone, head bowed, as the rest of us moved outside once more to greet the wind. The yacht rocked gently beneath our feet, steady and sovereign. Just like I always intended it to be. Brandon remained on the deck long after everyone else had gone below. He stared out at the marina as if hoping the calm water could offer an escape. But there was none. The sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving the yacht bathed in that pale lavender hue of early evening, where everything looks softer than it feels. I stood near the helm, hands behind my back, letting the silence do what my voice could not. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "Elliot, can we talk?" I didn't move. "We are talking." He took a hesitant step forward, his voice cracking. I messed up. I get that now. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all, but I didn't mean to insult you, or ruin this. I turned slowly. You didn't ruin the yacht, you ruined something else. Something much harder to rebuild. He exhaled a short, broken sound. I was under pressure, okay? Erica and we've been going through stuff. Financially, I was trying to keep it together. I thought this whole trip was some kind of show, like you were trying to prove something. I stepped closer. You thought I was trying to prove something by feeding you, housing you, and offering you a piece of your own legacy? He shook his head. No, His voice faltered. I've always felt like you looked down on me, like I wasn't good enough for Erica, like I was a charity case. I raised my brows. So you decided to destroy something to balance the scale? He didn't answer. He rubbed his hands over his face, shoulders hunched. I panicked. I didn't know the yacht was yours. If I had, you would have acted differently. I finished for him. Exactly. That's the problem. His head jerked up. What? That's the problem, Brandon. You only show respect when you believe it's required, not when it's right. You didn't value me until you found out I owned the boat. You didn't value what I offered until you thought you could lose it. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I could see the gears turning, his pride trying to reach for one last angle, one last plea. And then it came. Please don't take Erica away from me over this. His voice was raw, honest, maybe for the first time. We've been through so much. She's everything to me. I made a mistake, but I can fix it. Just please don't turn her against me. I looked him in the eye. You're the one who turned her. All I did was show her the truth. He closed his eyes, jaw tight. What do? I let the moment hang. You start by facing what you did. Not spinning it, not softening it, just standing in it. And then what? Then you let the consequences be the teacher. Not me. He stood there for a long time, staring at the deck beneath his shoes like it might offer him a second chance. But there are some moments you don't get to walk back from. Some moments that mark a line. When he finally walked down the steps and disappeared into the cabin, I didn't follow. I didn't have to. My work was done. The truth had been spoken. The mask had cracked. And the man who once thought himself untouchable now stood in the shadow of his own choices. And now, I want to hear from you. If you had been in my shoes, watching someone you welcomed, fed, respected, turn around and mock you, sabotage your gift, and humiliate you in front of your own family, what would you have done? Would you have exposed him the same way? Or would you have kept it all inside, letting the silence speak louder than any confrontation ever could? Tell me in the comments. I read every word. Because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about clarity, about finally seeing people for who they are, when the mask slips, when the cameras are rolling, when no one thinks you're watching. That moment changes everything. If this story hit close to home, if it made you feel something, anger, sorrow, satisfaction, then do one small thing for us. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to remember they're not alone. Comment your thoughts, your story, your justice. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Revenge is Mine, because every week we bring you tales of betrayal, power, and the sweet sting of truth finally being revealed. Hit that bell icon so you're always the first to see when the next chapter drops. Until next time, stay grounded, stay strong, and remember, sometimes revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just what's fair.